Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we are going to be doing some shorter-term technical analysis on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets because, guys, over the last several days, we have been having a lot of talk about the CME futures gap sitting down around $9,600, and judging by the fact that Bitcoin has not only broken above $11,000, but is in a pennant wedge formation to break even farther to the upside, we need to tackle the question, is Bitcoin going to fill that CME futures gap, and if so, is it going to happen soon? Remember also, guys, we have a 9 flash on the daily chart TD sequential that does signify that we're going to need to have some kind of pullback in the next couple of days. So is that going to line up with the Bitcoin CME futures gap that everybody loves talking about? Is it possible and is it likely that Bitcoin is about to pull back $1,500 to fill the CME futures gap? That's what we're going to be discussing in today's video, guys. I think you're going to get a lot of good value out of this video. If you do, as always, consider hitting that like and subscribe button down below. It really helps out the channel when you do that, and I'd be very appreciative if you did. Before we get started, guys, I do want to thank you for 16,000 views yesterday and 1.6K likes. Also, we can't forget the 400 comments on yesterday's video. You guys know I read every single one of them, so thank you so much for your engagement. Guys, a lot of awesome things are happening behind the scenes on the channel. We'll talk about that more at the end of the video, but for now, though, guys, without much further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. Before we get started, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by the Bybit referral link down below. If you would like to help support the channel while also getting started trading with leverage, you can use that link in the description down below. Fair warning and disclaimer, leverage trading is very dangerous. You can make a lot of money, but you can also lose a lot of money. So if you're experienced in the market and you want to support the channel, you can use that link to help out. Anyway, let's get started. You guys know, if you've been watching the channel, that we have had a 9 flash on our little super indicator right here, the TD sequential on the daily chart for Bitcoin. And that does mean that Bitcoin's going to need probably about 2 consecutive days of red of flagging for the TD sequential to be reset. If today's candlestick closes red, which it very well may not do that, I don't think it's going to, but if it did, that would reset the TD sequential. What I'm concerned about is that when Bitcoin ignores the TD sequential for 5, 6, 7 days, which it can do, and continues rallying in defiance of the RSI, which is already sitting at 81, then that means that Bitcoin starts to get overextended. So I want to pose to you, is it possible that Bitcoin, through this consolidation pattern that we're seeing here on the shorter term time frames, an ascending triangle pattern that is likely to break out today, probably before this video goes live, to be quite honest with you, through this ascending triangle pattern, does Bitcoin then break to the upside into the resistance we talked about yesterday around $11,700 to $12,000, reject from it, and then pull back in a big way, confirming the 9 flash on the TD sequential, and then do we pull back down to fill the CME futures gap? Well, I'll give you my take. I think personally that Bitcoin is probably going to do almost exactly what I just said. I think Bitcoin's going to break out today in acceptance of that consolidation pattern that we're seeing on the shorter term time frames on the hourly chart. I think Bitcoin is going to rally to around $12,000, and then I think it is going to get stopped out there. But then that leaves the final point of the hypothesis that I just posed. Does Bitcoin pull back and fill the CME futures gap? Let's look at that. As many of you guys will know, because many of you guys are the ones that were telling me about this, Bitcoin does indeed have a CME futures gap right here from $9,670 to $9,920. It's about $250 tall, which makes it a pretty substantial CME futures gap. Bitcoin has other CME futures gaps like people have talked about down here, which are not very large, but $250 is definitely substantial. CME futures gaps normally get filled, right? So doesn't that mean that Bitcoin's about to pull back $2,000 and fill that gap pretty soon? No. Hold your horses. First of all, before we even get into the prediction about whether or not Bitcoin pulls back, I need to clarify what people mean when they say that Bitcoin fills CME futures gaps, because people have a very, very warped understanding of the CME futures gap hypothesis that people have been talking about for the last year and a half. The idea that CME futures gaps on Bitcoin get filled all the time goes back to the stock market. In indexes, gaps are almost always filled. For example, on the SPY and the S&P 500, the DJI, the Russell 3000, those kind of indices, gaps are almost always filled. And the same thing is true for the limited history that we have on Bitcoin's CME futures chart that only goes back to about December 18th, 2017, if I remember the date right. Yes, so CME futures gaps very much normally get filled on this chart, but we have to realize a couple of things. Number one, this CME futures chart on Bitcoin is different than those indexes over in the stock market. Those have almost 100 years of history setting precedent that gaps will get filled. This chart for Bitcoin CME futures is only a couple years old. We haven't really had enough time to prove whether or not that's the same thing here. It would be unwise for us to say just because this happens all the time in this market means that it happens all the time in our market. Secondly, we need to think about the hypothesis that CME futures gaps always get filled. Guys, one of the things I try to talk about on this channel a lot is questioning. Question everything. If ever you're told by someone, oh, don't question that. That's just how it is. That's just how it always has been. That's just tradition. That's just the way this works. That is a very good reason to question it. And this case is no different. We need to question, why do CME futures gaps always get filled, and why do people say that they always get filled? Well, they say they always get filled because that's how it's always happened in the past. But is that really a causal relationship, or is that simply corollary? Is it simply a coincidence that CME futures gaps always get filled because of inherent volatility in crypto markets? Or is it actually a causal relationship? Do CME futures gaps actually hold technical power that have the ability to pull back markets and rally markets to fill said gaps? I know I'm getting a little bit technical here, but it's important that we understand the nuance of this so that we can actually decide whether or not this is going to have an impact on Bitcoin and cause a $2,000 correction. Do I believe Bitcoin needs some kind of flagging or very mild correction to reset the TD sequential and allow the RSI to cool off? Yes, absolutely, I do, but we have to remember the hype cycle we're in as well. Would it make sense that considering everything that's going on Bitcoin right now, guys, we just started a bull market, does it make sense, would pull back all the way down to and far below our downtrending level of resistance that we finally broke bullish out of after 3 years for the simple fact that there's a gap on one of the least watched charts in the crypto market? Because at the end of the day, the main people that are looking at CME futures are people that are trading on CME futures and YouTubers and content creators. Because CME futures gaps are something to talk about. There's always been a trend that CME futures gaps get filled, so it makes compelling content to say, hey, there's a CME futures gap, it must get filled. And I'm not denying that there is an overwhelming likelihood that this CME futures gap will get filled at some point. But we also have to ask the question, does that have to happen today, or can it happen 12 months from now? I'm not endorsing the idea that CME futures gaps are bogus and they're stupid and we shouldn't even pay attention to them. They are important, but I'm also endorsing critical thinking. What force, how powerful would a CME futures gap have to be to pull Bitcoin down $1,500 despite one of the biggest, most exuberant rallies in the last 3 years on Bitcoin? Does it really make sense that Bitcoin would be pulled back that far, despite everything that's going on, to fill one gap? In my opinion, absolutely not. CME futures gaps, in my experience, with a little bit of nuanced technical understanding of this, get filled because of the volatility in markets, not because there's an inherent force to them. It's not like gaps have some kind of gravitational or magnetic pull that just pulls the market towards them. They get filled because Bitcoin is stupidly volatile, guys. That's why they get filled. So does it make logical sense for us to expect Bitcoin to pull back $1,600, $1,700 for no apparent reason to fill a gap that, by the way, would pull us below the 20 daily EMA, which is a very powerful level of support that I could see us going back and testing. But by the time we get down there, we'd have to break that too to even have a chance to fill the gap. That doesn't make sense to me. Here's what does make sense to me. Bitcoin rallies, Bitcoin flags out. Some kind of flash crash happens 6 to 12 months from now and drops a wick down and fills this gap in the future. Or, guess what? The gap just never gets filled. It's very possible that the gap just never gets filled. It's very possible that Bitcoin never goes below $10,000 again. And just because there's a CME futures gap down there does not mean that Bitcoin has to pull back all the way. So I know a lot of you guys have been asking me, Jeb, what do you think about the CME futures gap? Is this going to cause a big correction on Bitcoin? No, seriously, it makes no sense that one gap would cause a gigantic correction. And by the way, if Bitcoin does pull back down there, I will come back to this video and quote myself saying that, because I'm still going to be right. Because if Bitcoin does pull back $2,000, the CME futures gap is not going to be the reason it happened. There will be another technical or fundamental reason that it occurred. Mark my words, if Bitcoin pulls back to $9,600 to test and fill the CME futures gap, there will be other reasons that have led to that. It will not be only the CME futures gap that predicted it. So that is my opinion on the matter. Many of you guys have been asking. Now you have it. With all of that said, I do want to make sure I'm very clear on my position here. And that is that, one, while I am very bullish on the long-term perspective and the long-term outlook on Bitcoin, I am also being a little bit cautious right now. Bitcoin has rallied very far. Bitcoin has become very exuberant. And I have seen too many times to tell that Bitcoin sometimes will rally 10, 15, 20, 30%, get the RSI overextended up into the 90s, and then have a TD sequential flash, and then guess what happens? We get so overexuberant that all the bulls go through all their cash, buy up all the Bitcoin they can, and then they have nothing in reserve, and then a support level breaks, and then, oh crap, everybody's out of money. They're already sitting on Bitcoin. How do we hold that support line? And Bitcoin falls. So yeah, guys, When you start rallying very quickly, it's very much easier to knock over a tower that's 1,000 feet tall than one that's 100 feet tall than one that's 10 feet tall. And as Bitcoin keeps getting taller, it gets easier to knock over. That's why I'm so excited that we're building support on the way up and getting above important levels of predefined support and resistance in the downtrend of resistance. Because now if Bitcoin does fall over, it's like we have a support structure at 1,000 feet and the tower just went to 1,200 feet. So actually, effectively, the tower is only 200 feet tall instead of 1,200 feet tall because it'd be easier to fall over if it were 1,200 feet tall. Is the CME futures gap going to get filled in the next month or so? I don't personally think so. Not with the way the outlook of Bitcoin looks. Is Bitcoin, however, going to have a $400, $500, $600, $700 correction? Maybe. I don't know that it's going to be that big, but I do know how the RSI works. I do know from watching dozens of rallies this large in cryptocurrency history that Bitcoin is going to need some kind of correction and pullback and consolidation relatively soon. Watch that RSI. The next few days on Bitcoin are probably still going to be pretty bullish. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I could see Bitcoin rallying to $12,000 pretty soon, but we're going to take a breather at some point. Guys, at the end of the day, we're talking about short-term technicals, and this is a long-term breakout. No matter what happens in the next month, Bitcoin has just broken the most, not one of, the most powerful downtrends of resistance in the history of the Bitcoin market. The technicals look fantastic. The foundation is laid on the chart. The fundamentals look incredible. The foundation is laid in the real world. Bitcoin is going into a big bull market, and a lot of people are putting predictions in the $20,000 to $30,000 region, and I think that's warranted. I do believe in the next 12 to 18 months we're going to be back at $20,000, maybe even sooner than that. Some of you guys think we're going to be there by the end of the year. I think that's a little optimistic, but I do think we're going there despite my differences in agreements on the timeline. I want you guys looking at the long term, but I also don't want you getting screwed over on the short term, because while the long term is bullish, that doesn't mean there's not going to be fluctuations in the middle. Guys, as Bitcoin was rallying to $20,000 the first time, there were many times where Bitcoin would pull back 40% and wiped out people who were in trades because they weren't being wise. In this time, more than any, I need to encourage you guys to make sure you're focused on wisdom and education and understanding of these markets so that you're not getting burned, because it's very easy to get burned, and I don't want to see that happen to you guys because, believe it or not, I do care very deeply about our subscribers here. So guys, I hope you got some good value out of this video. There's a lot of interesting topics in Bitcoin right now, which is a happy change of pace. So if there's anything you want me to talk about, like Ethereum, because Ethereum's going hog wild right now, or anything else having to do with news, different projects, anything that you think the majority of the people that watch this channel will be interested in, any patterns that I may have missed, let me know down below, because I want to make sure that we're making the content that you guys want, because at the end of the day, this journey that we're on is not for my sake, it's for your sake and the people that work with us' sake. I could talk all day about the things that I have wrong with the influencer industry in the cryptocurrency space. There's a lot of things that I would change, and there's a lot of things that I am going to change. And I'm very excited about the growth that we're having, because we're going to be able to make those positive changes for the right for you guys. I'm just really excited about the rest of 2020, guys. Look, 2020 has been a hard year, and I feel for everybody that has been going through pain this year, because there is a lot of pain that has happened this year, and I feel it, I see it, I can sense it. I have one of the people that we're working with right now has COVID. It has been a very tumultuous, troublesome, tribulation-filled year. But guys, I want you keeping your eyes on the prize and your head in the sky, because at the end of the day, that's all we can do. I have a vision of where we're going a year from now, and then where we're going 5 years from now, and then where we're going 10 years from now, and then where we're going 20 and 30 and 40 years from now. I have the entire vision, and it starts right here. So thank you guys so much for being along for the ride. I am really, really excited about what we're going to do. Guys, the next few months on this channel, I'm not going to lie to you, they're going to be pretty wild, and you're not going to want to miss it. We are going to have a lot of fun, and I am so pumped. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, guys. We're heading to 50K subs before moving to the office, and we're going to try and hit 75 before the end of the year. I want that 100K plaque by the time summer rolls around next year, and we're going to be doing a lot of good. So like I said, guys, hit that like and subscribe button. Before I go, though, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Love that song. Peace.